All right. Welcome to the webinar for AI for Competitive Intelligence, brought to you by Stifel. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan to talk a little bit about Stifel Venture Banking.
Sure. So obviously, I think we have repeat audience here who will, yeah, listen to this again. But yeah, so I'm Jonathan Moe. I'm VP here at Stifel Venture Banking in New York. We are the sort of preeminent bank for the venture ecosystem. So we bank startups, we bank the investors who invest in those startup companies. We provide venture, so we're full stack financial services institution, one of the largest banks in the United States, $500 billion on deposits. You know, we um, we focus a lot on very personalized service to our clients. I know, of course, probably every bank says that. I'm sure every company says that. I think in our case, we are uniquely positioned in terms of like the number of clients that we take on. And we're like quite selective about that. Even so, out of the very large venture ecosystem, we have hundreds of startups that bank with us. We have hundreds of startups where we have venture debt out to them. We also have hundreds of venture capital funds that have joined us on our platform. Now, on the fund side, we also do capital call lines for firms. We do some other stuff as well, like NAV lending. I think with VC firms, I would say a lot of our, you know, service to them comes on the ecosystem side, on the relationship side, connecting them with the right people, whether that's the founders they're looking to talk to or LPs when they're raising new funds. That's definitely something we do a lot. And then, yeah, the last thing I'll say is we do a lot of ecosystem support. So these webinars are part of that. We hold hundreds of events per year. My particular unit that I sit in actually runs most of the events and outreach. So yeah, and some of these can be found on our Luma. Not all our events are public, of course. Some are for clients, and others are for VCs and different firms that we work with. But whenever we do public events, they'll be on our Luma page. And yeah, so happy to have everyone here at the webinar. We also hold in-person workshops if you're in Manhattan. You can come to those. It's typically about once a month that we do that. And they are very much contiguous with webinars. And yeah, special thanks to Danny, of course, for continuing to host us here.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Cheers.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I've been doing startup coaching for a bit now, like 9+ years. Um, coach many of them in different capacity, mostly getting to product market fit, some of them in scaling, but mostly earlier stage. And in the past couple of years, like a lot of people, I've been engaged in more and more of AI enablement training and also helping different companies embrace this and also implement the the technology to multiply their productivity, but also to move faster. With that, today we're going to talk about competitive uh, intelligence. So track competitors, moves using live AI research. And then by the end of this, you'll also know how to run 4 activity workshop, landscape, moves, gap, and then the narrative itself for your strategy, and then set up a repeatable competitive intelligence system. You don't need the dedicated analyst. This is the agenda with some introduction, which we just did, and then what is CI and why it matters, and then we'll do like different demos, uh, and then we'll build upon one upon another, and then we'll end with Q&A. So what is competitive intelligence? What it actually is not just about identifying who are your competitors, but what they're doing as well. Especially these days with AI, things tend to move very, very fast. So we need to make sure that we're always at least aware of what's happening in the market. Product launches, messaging shift, which is part of what our competitors are doing, pricing changes, hiring patterns, signal about what they're headed. And it's especially if you're doing something related to tech, it's moving so fast. And in a lot of cases, founders skip this because it's too noisy, too many signals. And then in the past, this has been very manual, spreadsheet, Google Alerts. And also, by the time you're done with it, it's outdated because things move so fast and this takes so much time. Now, the cost of not doing this is that you could get caught off guard, losing deals, managing the drift, but also another thing, the big thing is that if the market is shifting and your business model is getting disrupted, that's another thing that could be very bad for your business, obviously. And these things can give you the signal of things moving in that direction, or maybe also signaling opportunities for you, right? And today we're going to be using Perplexity. If you haven't used that, Perplexity is essentially they're trying to be the Google or basically the search for AI. And they're trying to become something else now because it's everybody can do this grounding. So the whole point of this is this: when it started, AI could only answer based on or like do things that they only knows things that were included in its training, right? It's pattern recognition, trying to give you the answer that you want. Now, that is problematic because if, let's say, the latest GPT uh, got released today, that means that the training ended a few months ago. So in between those time, like when the training ended and now things have developed, and GPT wouldn't be aware of it. That's why there is this thing called grounding, right? Which is essentially as simple as, wait, don't just answer based on what you know. Look online, use the web search, do research first, find the most up-to-date information, and then answer. And that's what Perplexity is designed to do from the very beginning. That's why they're still the very best at that. So it does differently by searching the live web before answering. It cites its sources by default. That's its main thing. So you can actually verify what you're reading and then grounded output based on what's happening right now. So just gonna go there, perplexity.ai. I'm also using their version of the Chrome browser. This is Perplexity Comet, but this is the same as essentially if you go to perplexity.ai, it's the same thing. So let's say if I want to know, let's say why is NVIDIA a good company to invest in? Right, so it's going to search the web first before it answers. And then it's checking current information about NVIDIA, and then you can see that it has the sources here. You can also do even like the deep research. This is just like basic search. You can do the, well, deep research is pro. If you use it a lot, then it would look at hundreds and hundreds of sources. Google does this too, Gemini does this, but from what I experienced, Google's version is more academic compared to NVIDIA's. I mean, compared to Perplexity's. So that's Perplexity, and we're going to use it. I'm going to uh, as we go, I'm going to drop this prompt in the chat so you can follow along if you want to do this. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is to map the landscape to define the competitor set, establish the players and emerging ones. That's very important because now it's becoming easier and easier, especially in tech sector, to get into the market. So this is the prompt. I'm going to drop it in the chat and I'm going to go over it and we'll drop it into Perplexity. I'm gonna ask it to give me the competitive landscape overview for, and I'm going to put my product category. And for this, I'm gonna put AI enablement training or something like that. Focus on the 3 to 5 most established players by market presence. plus one to notable newcomers. This is important to know like where the market is heading or emerging players that could disrupt the space. For each include, so this is like so that it doesn't drift and just try to include everything and become useless. I wanted to include these things, what they offer, who they target, how they position themselves, and their approximate pricing. So this way I can get a big picture idea of what's going on. Format as a comparison table. This is another important thing because if it's just like words, like wall of words, it's gonna be hard for me to consume this. So I want it as a comparison table and then add 2 or 3 sentence summary of the overall landscape. So I could just digest it quickly, right? So let's drop this in the chat, new chat. I'm gonna change this, your product category to you can watch this like these steps as well, what it looked at. So it's gathering market start information for this, checking enterprise pricing, and here it is. It looks like it's a pretty busy market. Anthropic. Now I'm going to see if the biggest incumbent win on trust, breadth, and ability. Da, da, da. And then the other thing that's really cool about Perplexity is that it has this follow-ups. There are two things you can see. There's the computer. This is their premium product uh, where Perplexity can use your computer. Well, not necessarily computer. They assign a computer to you actually in their cloud, not using your local computer. That's the difference between this versus, let's say, OpenClaw or even Claude. They assign a computer in the cloud where it can, like, for example, in this one, monitor this thing, right? And then this is also like build a dashboard, but it's happening in the cloud and it's just running the multiple step task. Now, if you want to follow certain rabbit hole, you can you can use these follow-ups also, which is very useful. For example, emerging annual pricing models, mid-market clients, what buyers prefer, practical takeaway, and so on, right? But so at least now we have an idea of the players, what's happening, and also the big picture, who they target, how they position themselves, and so on. Now, so we got the baseline, and we still need what has changed recently, where the real cracks are, what they're signaling about where they're headed. That's what we're gonna do in the activity too. Okay, so we want to surface what every competitor has been doing lately. This is gonna be the prompt. So we want to know what's happening in the market, essentially. For each competitor you identified in the landscape overview, which is above, we're just going to use the same thread. Search for recent activity from the last 6 months. So this is very important to be explicit about the time range. Otherwise, it's going to, again, drift and use their training data and go maybe like to like a year or 2 years back, which is not going to be useful for us. And new product, and this is the kind of thing that we wanted to identify, new product features or launches, changes to their websites, messaging or pricing, notable job postings, hiring patterns. So different signals. For each one, summarize what they're prioritizing right now and what their recent moves suggest about their direction. So we're also asking it to give us some kind of analysis and then organize your findings by competitors. because it's already been identified the players, we could just like drop it here as a follow-up. Now, one thing to note here is that I didn't pick the model. By default, I think it just picked auto. But for the pro version, you can potentially pick the different models. For a lot of these, I don't see choosing the model, specific model really help, to be honest, because
Hey,
really what
Danny,
you're using is the harness. Just go ahead, Dipesh.
quick question. Can you give me like a 60-second rundown of the different models? Like I know Gemini has them, a lot, all of these softwares have them. I just don't understand when to pick and what to pick.
Mm-hmm. So the main thing there is really you want to understand which class of models first. There's like the coding models, right? There is like the general purpose model for the day-to-day work, and there is like the really like the coding normally is also the reasoning, the thinking models, the heavy hitters. You probably
Mhm.
heard recently about Fable or Mythos. There's like even the bigger one, right? So it and then on that's like from the Anthropic side, there's the Fable Mythos class, and there's the Opus class, and then there's this sonnet class, and then there's the haiku class. Haiku is like the quick answer, very fast. Sonnet is day to day, more reasoning, but not as heavy as Opus. Opus is for like coding, and Fable is for like cybersecurity, like something like really, really uh, complex. On the OpenAI, they also have different level like that. Same thing
Yeah,
with Gemini.
yeah. Can you give me a quick rundown on the Gemini ones?
The
Because
Gemini one,
there's
I
like Flash, there's a 3.5 and a
I
Pro, and I
honestly I'm not familiar with the Gemini latest models, but normally there's
okay,
the Pro and then the Flash level. The Pro
okay.
is definitely more thinking, and then you can just check on the model like the levels like that. I think actually let's go there real quick and see what they have here. So
There's
there's
Flash, Thinking, and
Flashlight,
Pro.
Flash, and then Pro, and then you also have the thinking level, which is basically what it is that in under the hood, what it does is that because this is a probabilistic machine, it just roll the dice more to be more careful, right? Because the more it tries, then
Hmm.
the better supposedly the answer will be, and it slow things down and planning more, that kind of thing.
Okay. And then the other thing I didn't understand on Gemini, what gems are.
It's gonna be similar to what we're doing today with the spaces.
Okay.
So
Okay.
once we get there, then we can circle back to that. Okay. So
Okay.
essentially, it's reusable container for your project, so you can reuse these things. We'll get there. But that's the
Okay.
Gemini version of what we will be doing with Perplexity, which is called Spaces. And in OpenAI, like ChatGPT world, is called Custom GPT. In the Cloud world, is called Projects. It's the same thing.
Got it. Okay.
Cool. All right. So we can circle back to that. And if you still have question at the end, but that's a great question. Acquired. So now competitor by competitor snapshot based on activity in roughly the last 6 months and based on this, right? So that's why we ask it. So it's using the sources from the actual company, obviously, for like recent activity, but also from other places. So AWS, OpenAI, recent activity, and so on. So cross-cutting patterns, so this is very good to just like quickly digest this, right? And it's using 7 sources. Across this set, the consistent pattern is a pivot from generic AI capability to concrete agentic workflows. So that's similar to that gem thing that we touched on, like essentially get these things to run and do things for us. This is why also earlier I mentioned about the computer use from Perplexity. Everything is moving towards the agentic world. And vertical packages and workforce transformation, often bundled with platform like tools for discovery, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's like the positioning that's happening. And now we have an idea of okay, this is where the market is moving, where it's headed to. So now that we have that, we have reliable signals to press releases, product announcements, because that's the official content, right? So we can rely on that for not lying or like no very little risk or no risk of hallucination from the AI side. Change log entries, job postings, pricing page changes. These are things that we should verify. Recently launched claims, especially from external source, make sure that you check the source date as well. How recent is that? Funding news older than 12 months, context may have shifted. Review site data, because like site data could be lagged. And also, another thing that's very important is that if there is no recent activity on a competitor, that's also a signal. You may want to look into that as well. Like, okay, why have they been quiet? What's going on there? Okay, now that we have identified the players, we identified what they've been doing, now let's try to find the gap. And then this is the prompt. Based on the recent moves you found across all competitors, what customer pain points or segment are they collectively ignoring or underserving? So this could be the area that we want to focus on, right? Identify 2 to 3 specific positioning gaps where a new player or challenger could win. So this is finding that wedge to get in, or a new opportunity that's been ignored. And notice that I just continued using the same thread so that the context is maintained. So I don't have to keep telling Perplexity, oh, this is my business. Like, no, it's just, it continues the conversation.
Danny, could you dilate on that a little? Like, how does it maintain the context without you re-injecting it in this case?
Because it has the memory, right? So the short-term
Oh,
memory.
okay. So you're just ours. You're just saying it's kept in memory.
I'm sorry?
Okay, sorry. You're just referring to the fact that like it's stored it in the memory for this thread. Is what you're saying.
For this particular thread, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, I was actually wondering because I'm interested in going beyond that, right? Like obviously there's a lot of work on expanding the ability for LLMs to build graph memories and then re-inject them, like using because you basically you have another layer that like injects memories when it needs them. So it replicates sort of more biological memory better. Anyway, sorry.
You
Just something
mean
I've been
like leveraging more of the long-term memory?
sort of. I mean, I'm just referring to like stuff that hasn't come out yet, like experimental tech where they're working on building memory systems, right, that work more like biological memory than current in context window only memory, which is kind of how they all work now, right?
They do have that kind of long-term memory that's personalized to the user. I know Perplexity does have that, ChatGPT, I think,
Yeah,
and
it's
Claude.
it's not. Yeah, I think I'm referring to something a little different though, right? So in other words, like for instance, generally the way for it, even if it stores, let's say, all of that information, to be fair, they don't store that much because, right, technically that means you would have to just store everything
Mm-hmm.
and then dump it into the context window, right? So, like, in order for it to, I guess what we're talking about is recall. In order for it to recall something, it needs to obviously perform essentially a search and then find the information, then re-inject it into the context window, right, for a certain query or an interaction. But like in theory, that's not how biological memory works, right? Like biological memory, like the brain, stores all the information simultaneously, like in parallel. And so the idea is it doesn't. Now we're getting a little bit far out of the topic, but like it doesn't actually need to perform a query, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
contextually aware of that fact. So if I remember that I met you 20 years ago or something, right? And I told you a joke 20 years ago, and 20 years later, I reference this inside joke, right? And you start laughing. You're
Mm-hmm.
not laughing because your brain performed a query, right? That remembers it. And that would be the equivalent of an LLM. It would have to know, right, that I told that joke in order to look for it in the first place. It could store everything it knows about me, That's true. And the joke would be in there and could dump that into the
Mhm.
context window. But that's not how biological memory works. Biological memory, right, would contextually get triggered because I'm saying something, right, that fires a neuron where that memory of that joke is stored. Anyway, sorry, this is like super off topic, but
I think just to close on this loop, that is the way they use the vector database to try to mimic this.
yeah, I I would say there's still I'd say it's quite different, but yes, you theoretically can if you built a vector database, a graph vector database in particular, you you could, but right now LLMs are not really set up for that for
Yeah,
anything.
you do need to actually add that as part of your infrastructure in order for it to work that way.
Sure.
I mean, like something like Hermes or Hermes or OpenClaw, you could do that by there's like different level of that. Like for example, the things that they use all the time, like the about the user. There's an MD file that gets updated regularly for that. About the system itself, there's sol.md that gets updated by regularly. But there is
Mhm.
like you can put that layer of uh, long-term memory, if you will, the
Sure.
vector database, and then every time it does uh, it's given a task, it would start with that, like what try to recall relevant things based on the task itself, the context of the task.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
back
Sorry.
to um okay, so we wanted to get an idea of the gaps in the market based on what was in the recent moves that they made. So here's what we got. So gap one is the post-pilot AI operating system for mid-market operators. What's happening? Research on AML shows adoption is widespread, but most organizations are stuck on readiness governance that can turn pilots into repeatable systems. This is actually a massive thing I've been hearing as well. Creating things become easy, but then after things have been created to actually continue using them, maintaining them, things just like break, especially this agentic stuff that are brittle. Why this gap? So on and so forth. But then positioning opportunity is post-pilot AI ops for mid-market. Okay, interesting. Deep workflow. This is what we're gonna be seeing more and more. The workflow. Opinionated, outcome, price, agentic automation for narrow but important processes. See, this is kind of related to what we saw earlier with the processes that are continuously stay effective and not break and deliver the outcome, not just like, oh, now we can just do this, not like the vanity metrics as in now we instead of like 5 hours, now we can do this in 2 minutes, which is great, obviously, as a starting point. But then does it deliver the result? Can we actually trust it? Does it actually require the human to clean up the mess if it breaks? And what are the things that break? Okay, now this is the summary, putting it together with the broader research in Microsoft are not underserved on tools, they're underserved on operationalization, change, and package outcome. So I love the way it just distill everything like this so that I could like, oh, okay. Normally the way I read this is I go straight to the bottom first to this, to the summary, and then consume the details as I need to. All right, continuing on. So that's the gap that we discovered. So the strong gap statement, what good output looks like, most player in this place. This is an example. Target enterprise buyer with complex onboarding, essentially is specific, is actionable, and points to real segment. If it's too vague, push the customer an unmet need, then you need to like actually ask it to be more specific, to like ask for these things. Okay, now we wanted to help us distill this, synthesize this into a strategic brief that our team can use. And this is the prompt, which I'm going to drop into the chat. Now synthesize everything you've covered into a competitive intelligence brief. So it's going to, again, look at the context of what we discussed so far, with the research, and it's going to synthesize it, distill it into a 2 to 3 sentence summary of the current competitive landscape. That's from activity 1. And then the single biggest opportunity for differentiation we identified based on 2 and 3, and then 2 and 3 strategic implications. What should we consider changing about our positioning, messaging, or roadmap based on this? So now this assumes that you've been using Perplexity and it has like that memory that Jonathan and I discussed a little bit. If it doesn't have that, then most likely you'll need to provide a little bit of that context so that it knows how to do that latter part. Since I've been using Perplexity, it should know a little bit about my business. Okay, strategic implication, position on a clear promise, not AI strategy, but we help mid-market operators turn AI into working processes in 30 to 90 days. So more about the operations, package services, into productized ladder, diagnostic pilot operating. No. So this way we have a clear direction of, okay, how do we position our messaging? And from here, we could potentially take this and signal to the market by, for example, updating our marketing materials like the website and whatnot, so that it's taking advantage of this opportunity. And then this is the part that we discussed earlier, Dipesh, about like making it repeatable with the spaces that's essentially the equivalent to Gemini gems. And here we could go to here, spaces. We'll go there, but before we go there, okay, I'm just gonna go there real quick actually to show you what that looks like. So a space essentially is a container. This is where things become more agentic, meaning that it will do things for us. We give it a name, obviously, and just a description of what it is, the human description. And then this is the part that's very important. We're going to give it an instruction. So this is called a system prompt normally, that it will bundle with the prompt that we give it. So it will always have this in the context. So this could be like you're giving it a role. You are competitive intelligence expert. This is your task. This is your goal. This is how you do things, right? And then every time we do a chat with this agent, you don't have to explain these things again and again. The context is there. That's what makes it powerful. Now, I don't want to write this. So I'm just going to ask Perplexity actually, because we already have this context, to create that system prompt for me. So this is the prompt. Drop in the chat again. It says, based on our work in this thread, write a system prompt for Perplexity, a Perplexity space that makes this 4-step CI workflow repeatable. As simple as that. It's just describing what I wanted to do, right? Here you go. I'm just gonna drop this whole thing. I'm gonna copy and paste this whole thing. Actually, I like this. I can also turn this into a tighter version of tighter version optimized for actual space instruction. Okay. I'm just gonna copy this and like, yes. There you go. So it includes the role that this agent will play, which is you are a competitive intelligence assistant for AI enablement consultant and consulting business. This way, it knows to actually focus on this area as part of the context, right? And your job is to do this, which are like the things that we did earlier. And then here are the rules it needs to follow. These are the formatting. This is the style. So I'm gonna copy this whole thing, put it in the spaces, create a new space. I'm gonna put it AI enablement competitive intelligence agent. Create. This is for sharing, so other people can use this as well. Now, this is the space, right? We can add links, we can add files to augment its context, right? And we can also add skills. Skills are additional instructions, set of instructions for completing particular tasks. Like, for example, the task could be, I'm just making this up. Let's say review the usability, because it's going to be used across multiple projects. We want it to be a repeatable instruction that's not only confined to a particular project, or in this case, space, right? Now that I have this, I could just say start. I don't have to put any prompt. Yes. Hold on, A enablement this. Are we here? Start the analysis. Let's see if it does it. This is interesting. It's supposed to just run it. Okay, I'm just gonna ask it first. Can you run the instructions? So it wants the markets, it wants input first. Okay. Specific regions, I just want to say US. Any companies, good, exclude, no, recommend. Before I start the research, I need last confirm, do you need a brief focus on AI enabling general enterprise cross industry? I'm just gonna say general. See, it's just like following the instruction and running this. It keeps asking for permission. Sometimes you just need to tell it, give it permission to run. There it is. So it gives me the landscape, competitor updates really quickly, and then underserved gaps, like what we did, strategic opportunities, and a strong challenger message would be this. All repeatable, so we can just keep doing this over and over, like, and really quickly without having to put in the manual prompts. And this is something that you could also do in Google. So this is in Gemini, the gems. The same thing here. You have the name, description, the instructions, right? It also has default tools if you want to use these different tools. But for something like this, you may want deep research. You may not, depending on how extensive you want it to be. And the knowledge, the more additional context. The cool thing about Gemini Gem is that it has this preview, so you can test it out a little bit. Actually, let me just put in the same system prompt and see what it gives me. Let's do the same thing here. Since we have a little bit of time, describe default tool. I'm gonna save it first. Created. Check. Okay. Let's see. There it is. The same thing. Style. Da da da. Different output though, which is interesting. But it followed the same process that I outlined in that instruction. Market gap, strategic intelligence brief, and then positioning, right? And it also showed this in the table format. Now, the thing with Gemini is that it used to show the sources. Now it doesn't for whatever reason. I don't know why they're not showing it anymore. So that's the part that worries me because I want to be able to actually check the work. But if you trust Google, you can do this. Let's see response detail. Let me see if there's this. Yeah, there's nothing in the response details. It just used 3.5 flash. What's cool about this though, if you see something like this, a table, you can export it to Google Sheets and you can continue working that way. It's that kind of thing is very handy with Gemini. All right. So we have that. Oh, and the other thing is that with these, they have memory. So we can turn it on to make the project smarter. So it can connect the dots, supposedly. I don't know how smart it actually becomes, but the whole point of this is that over time, it would uh, accumulate the knowledge and remember it and refer and use it as part of the context for the future work. Gemini also has that, I believe, with the gems. Let me just open that. Let's go back there. Oh, knowledge default tool. Where was that? I thought I saw it. Huh. And disable knowledge citation. Default tool. Yeah, I don't see it. I remember. I thought I saw it. Okay, let me just go back to the gem and see if it's there by default. I just open new chat. It doesn't have the memory actually. I think it's implicitly there, but I don't know how well it's integrated into the responses. With that, thank you. And if you have any questions, we can chat more about it. The next one will be AI for market research, Wednesday, July 8th. And with that, Dipesh, any questions from that conversation about the gems and spaces?
No, that was actually really helpful. I've got a bunch of ideas to how to setting up the gems or spaces and then putting it on autopilot.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad. Yeah, the thing about Google Gems is, I mean, at least the Gemini stuff, it's limited to what Google has to offer, which is still a lot, right? Google try to offer everything. But when it comes to tools, the integration is not as open as Anthropic's ecosystem
Mhm.
because the MCP and all those things, the connectors, Anthropic has like thousands people keep building and contributing to that, but Google tried to keep it within their own walled gardens, obviously.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
All right.
All
Jonathan,
right, thank you.
any
Yeah.
last words
No, just a question for you. So we're moving to Wednesday. They're in.
for the July 8th? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you. Bye.
See you later.